Friendsify you watch super hit movie Sisu in English, then you must like this video if you are visiting our channel for the first time. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Sisu. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I also going to give you all the information on which OT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office, collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, StarCast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. So let's start the video. Sisu is a 2022 Finnish historical action thriller film written and directed by Jalmari Helander and produced by Petri Jokeranta. The film stars Jorma Tommila alongside Aksel Hennie, Jack Doolan, Mimosa Willamo, and Onni Tommi. Set during the Lapland War between Finland and Nazi Germany towards the end of World War II, a legendary Finnish army commando-turned-gold prospector attempts to defend himself from being robbed and murdered by a Waffen-SS platoon led by an infamously brutal and corrupt officer. Originally, Helander was supposed to work on the science fiction comedy Jerry and Miss Universe as his next project after Big Game, but the COVID-19 pandemic changed Helander's plan and he moved on to make Sisu. An international co-production between Finland and the United States, the film was shot in 2021 near the Nuorgam village in Utsjoki, Lapland, with a budget of about $6 million. $6.5 million. According to Helander, the 1982 film First Blood and the real-life Finnish military sniper Simo Häyhä, who fought against the Red Army, served as inspirations for the film. Sony Pictures Worldwide Acquisitions acquired the film's worldwide distribution rights outside of the Nordic countries, and Lionsgate Films acquired the film's North American distribution rights from Stage 6. Sisu debuted in the Midnight Madness series at the Toronto International Film Festival on the 9th of September 2022. The film premiered in Finland on the 27th of January 2023. It was released in the United States on the 28th of April 2023 and received positive reviews from critics. The film's sequel, Sisu: Road to Revenge, will be released on the 21st of November 2025. Plot. In late 1944, during the Lapland War, a Tommy Korpi lives alone with his horse and faithful Bedlington Terrier while he searches for gold in the wilderness of Lapland in the gold rush. He uncovers a rich deposit, collects a large quantity of nuggets, and travels towards Rovaniemi. Along the way, Otomi encounters a large Waffen-SS platoon led by Obersturmführer Bruno Helldorf. Helldorf is destroying villages during their retreat towards Norway and has taken several Finnish women captive. Helldorf takes little interest in Otomi, letting him pass. Otomi is soon accosted by a second unit of SS soldiers who discover his saddlebags full of gold. They jeeringly decide to rob and kill him, but he swiftly kills them all instead. Alerted by the gunfire, Helldorf investigates and discovers the massacre and one of Otomi's gold nuggets. Helldorf and his tank pursue Otomi to the edge of a minefield where Otomi's horse is killed by a landmine. Gathering up his gold while Helldorf and his men watch, Otomi intentionally detonates another mine to make his escape. Several soldiers are sent after him, but are quickly blown up by mines. Helldorf orders two of the captive women ahead to ensure a clear path. After retrieving Otomi's dog tag, Helldorf's second-in-command Wolf learns over the radio of Otomi's past. After losing his family while fighting as a Finnish army commando during the Winter War, the vengeful Otomi became the legendary one-man death squad, whom Joseph Stalin's Red Army nicknamed Koschei, the Immortal. Helldorf defies his orders to continue retreating in order to hunt down Otomi and steal the gold, explaining to Wolf that Nazi Germany has already lost the war and they will need the gold to escape prosecution for war crimes. The German soldiers dispatch dogs to follow Otomi's trail. Otomi sends his own dog away before using petrol from one of the German trucks to cover his scent. However, the soldiers soon discover him and Otomi dives into a nearby lake. Heldorf sends 3 soldiers onto the lake in a boat, but Tommi kills 2 of them by slitting their throats underwater and breathes in the escaping air from their necks. The remaining German soldier attempts to flee, but is killed by Wolf. Tommi uses the soldier's body as a shield after reaching the riverbank and escapes. On the other side of the river, Tommi's dog is discovered by Heldorf. Tommi discovers that Rovaniemi has been left in burning ruins and takes shelter in the remains of a petrol station. Heldorf sends Tommi's dog to find him, but with a lit steel hand grenade attached to his collar. Tommi saves his dog but is knocked down and stunned when the grenade explodes. Heldorf, Wolf, and tank driver Schütze hang Tommi, taking the gold and leaving him for dead, but Tommi impales one of his wounds onto protruding rebar, saving his life. Sometime later, a pair of German pilots land in search of fuel. Tommi kills the engineer and forces the surviving pilot to fly him ahead of Heldorf's platoon. Heldorf soon discovers the abandoned plane in their path, with the pilot hanged by the same noose Wolf used on Tommi. As the convoy continues, Tommi climbs onto the truck holding the female captives, kills their guards, and arms the women. Aino, the de facto leader of the women, commandeers one of the trucks, allowing Tommi to leap onto Heldorf's tank while the women gun down the rest of the soldiers. Tommi pulls Wolf out of the tank before leaving him at the mercy of the women. Heldorf reaches a commandeered Soviet plane and kills Schütze before taking off with the pilot. Tommi fires at the plane, mortally wounding the pilot, and uses his pickaxe to get on board in midair. Heldorf and Tommi engage in hand-to-hand combat. After Heldorf gets the upper hand, Tommi swiftly hooks a static line to a bomb before releasing it, dropping Heldorf to his death. After finding that the pilot is dead, Tommi straps himself in as the plane crashes into a swamp. Led by Aino, the freed women drive the commandeered German tank with a beaten Wolf strapped to the turret to an incredulous Finnish army unit. Tommi crawls out of the swamp and reunites with his dog before making his way to war-ravaged Helsinki. He enters a bank and empties his satchels of gold onto a teller's counter, then speaks for the first time with a request to exchange it for paper currency. Bills. Big ones, please. Won't be so damn heavy to carry. Cast: Jorma Tommila as Tommi Korpi, Aksel Hennie as Bruno Heldorf, Jack Doolan as Wolf, Mimosa Willamo as Aino, Onni Tomila as Schütze, Tatu Sinisalo as SS Soldier 1, Wilhelm Enkel as SS Soldier 3, Arttu Kapulainen as Rower, Ilkka Koivula as Fighter Pilot, Max Ovaska as Engineer, Pekka Huotari as Pilot, Severi Saarinen as Troop Leader, Vincent Willestrand as SS Soldier 4, Amu Milanov as Bank Teller. Reception. Box office. In the United States and Canada, Sisu was released alongside Big George Foreman and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and was projected to gross around $4 million from 900 theaters in its opening weekend. It made $1.4 million on its first day, including $585,000 from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut to $3.3 million, finishing 8th. In total, Sisu grossed $7.3 million in the United States and Canada and $7 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $14.3 million. The trailer for Sisu, Road to Revenge, has arrived. The upcoming Finnish movie, which is set to premiere in domestic theaters on November 21st, is a sequel to 2023's Sisu, which followed the minor Tommi Korpi, Jorma Tommila, fighting Nazi soldiers who were trying to take his gold toward the end of World War II. Road to Revenge, which sees writer-director Jalmari Helander returning to the helm, will follow Korpi as he seeks revenge against the man who is responsible for the death of his family, Commander Igor Dragunov, Stephen Lang of the Avatar franchise. English-speaking actor Richard Brake, The Strangers, Chapter 2, Barbarian, The Munsters, has also joined the cast. Sony Pictures Entertainment has now unveiled the first official trailer for Sisu, Road to Revenge. The trailer opens with Tommi Korpi and his dog driving toward the Soviet-Finland border in 1946. This is followed by a scene where Igor Dragunov is warned that the vengeful legend has already been in the Soviet Union for 10 hours. Igor is tasked with cleaning up his mess, but he realizes he might be taking on more than he bargained for with Korpi when the unassuming man backs into a soldier with his truck, smashing him through a windshield. The trailer then showcases extensive footage of a high-octane chase sequence that includes a plane crashing into Korpi's truck. The two characters then alternate who has the upper hand as the rest of the trailer showcases a barrage of violent, action-packed moments. One of the most intense sees Igor threatening a tied-up Korpi with torture. Watch the full trailer below. This trailer showcases that Sisu Road to Revenge is taking advantage of its increased budget by featuring even more action set pieces than the original movie. Overall, in addition to the increased intensity of the violence, the setting of the movie seems considerably more expansive. While the original Sisu reportedly cost €6 million, roughly $6.5 million, Road to Revenge's reported budget is $12.2 million. However, in spite of the movie's larger scale, the trailer reveals that Road to Revenge will have an even simpler plot than Sisu, focusing largely on the animosity between two men and the operatic violence that occurs when they butt heads. Additionally, the trailer confirms the basic timeline of the movie. Because the movie takes place in 1946, the story will pick up just over a year after the ending of Sisu, which took place in late 1944. This means that it will be taking place after the end of World War II, which concluded on September 2, 1945. Ultimately, it remains to be seen if Sisu Road to Revenge lives up to the promise of the original World War II movie. On Rotten Tomatoes, its predecessor has a certified fresh 94% score from critics, in addition to 88% from audiences. While this gives the movie a lot to live up to, the trailer reveals that Sisu Road to Revenge is upping the ante in a major way that could potentially win over both groups. This review was originally part of our coverage for the 2022 Toronto International Film Festival. From the first moments of Sisu, writer-director Jalmari Helander, Rare Exports, A Christmas Tale, Big Game, focuses on the determination of Atomi Korpi, Jorma Tommila. Living in the wilderness of Finland's Lapland region during the end of World War II, Atomi seems set on avoiding the world around him for as long as possible. As warplanes fly low overhead with a staggering roar, Atomi acts as though he has heard nothing, continuing his search for gold. The scars of the past are still upon Atomi, both literally and figuratively, and when he finally strikes gold, we see the glimmer of joy in the man who has isolated himself from the destruction occurring around him. At the beginning of Sisu, we are told that the title refers to a Finnish word that means a white-knuckled form of courage and unimaginable determination, and that Sisu manifests itself when all hope is lost. For the next hour and a half, Helander will show Sisu incarnate through Atomi, who almost acts as the Second World War's John Rambo, systematically destroying those who get in his way. Once Atomi has his pockets and horse packed with gold, he soon comes across a Nazi patrol led by SS Obersturmführer Bruno Helldorf, Aksel Hennie, who vastly underestimate the determination of Atomi. Set in 1944, when the Nazis are clearly losing the war, Helldorf and his men know that their end is near, and upon seeing Atomi's gold, realize they might be able to maintain some wealth once the war is over. However, Atomi is no ordinary man, and Sisu soon becomes a battle between this older man and this entire Nazi regime that takes place on land, water, and through the sky. Helander gleefully embraces the absurdity and violence of this scenario. Sometimes the mayhem on display can be shocking and brutal, as when the Nazis force their men to walk through a minefield, or when Atomi has to repair his wounds in gnarly fashion. But other times, the violence is so over the top and wild, Sisu almost feels like Finland's answer to RRR, as it almost seems like Atomi is an unstoppable force who can find a way out of any scenario thrown his way. Aesthetically, Helander makes Sisu part spaghetti western, part grimy war film, and part Looney Tunesian ridiculous adventure. Much like how Helander took Santa Claus lore and turned it into the ludicrous Rare Exports, he takes a similar approach with this Nazi hunting tale, mixing history with sheer insanity. But even when Sisu cranks up the preposterous nature of this story, it's Tommila that keeps this take grounded. as much as it can be. Like a 1940s John Wick, we learn what Tommi has had to deal with, the past that he's attempted to leave behind, and the understandable rage that he feels towards those who have stated themselves to be better than the others around them. Tommi at times seems like an unstoppable killing machine, but Tommila plays the character as a man just attempting to live through the day. He will kill who he needs to, protect those that need help, and find do-it-yourself ways to keep breathing for a few more minutes. And yet, we know he'd much rather be counting his earnings with his trusty dog by his side. But look, this isn't an attempt to tell a nuanced story, but rather a way for Helander to show some of the most over-the-top and insane murders of Nazis ever committed to screen in bonkers fashion. In fact, Helander could have easily just named this movie Fuck Nazis, and it would have made perfect sense. Again, this is a Whoa 2 movie from the guy who made Rare Exports, and a film that is debuting at TIFF's Midnight Madness presentation, so don't expect subtlety with Sisu. Helander's latest film is a gory, often disgusting and ridiculous action film that revels in its absurdity, a film that simply wants to kill Nazis in new and interesting ways, and achieves that goal wholeheartedly. Sisu is certainly ridiculous, but sometimes it's just fun to watch an obscene amount of Nazis get what's coming to them. Jalmari Helander hasn't made a feature since 2014's Big Game, then the most expensive Finnish film to date. It was an unabashed, bombastic, good-humored action crowd pleaser that indeed pleased crowds at festivals, while mysteriously failing to catch on with general audiences. Presumably his concept was just too high for mainstream viewers to swallow. Though they don't have any problem with Gerard Butler or Will Smith doing similar honors, it seemed too much to accept a 13-year-old Finn boy single-handedly rescuing the President of the United States from an obstacle course of assassination peril. That failure must have hurt. Helander has spent the interim on episodic work. His new Sisu is in many ways cut from the same cloth as Big Game, as a splashy popcorn action piece, unconcerned with credibility, pushing well-worn ideas to outlandish and outrageously entertaining ends. But the writer-director has hedged his bets by moving one key piece in the game to the opposite end of the board. This time, instead of a juvenile protagonist that made viewers wonder whether they were watching a movie for kids or for grown-ups, the answer, both, apparently confused them, we get a crusty coot quite spry enough to take on all foes, which bad guys might pretty much be termed the entire Third Reich. The resulting mashup of Liam Neeson-esque arse-whopping senior and Inglourious Bastards terrain is a one-joke movie that manages to sustain said joke with esprit. Gleefully over the top, utilizing explosions and gore to comic effect as expertly as Buster Keaton did pratfalls, it's a bad taste, feel-good exercise likely to delight many, even if it's definitely not for everyone. Sony has already acquired the TIFF premiering English-language productions international rights outside Nordic territories, with U.S. distribution still up for grabs. Prospects should surely restore the director's commercial luster, at least to the level of his 2010 debut, macabre Yuletide fantasy favorite, Rare Exports. Opening text explains the title as an untranslatable local term for a white-knuckled form of courage and unimaginable determination manifested when all hope is lost. Then map graphics briefly summarize Finland's battered straits during World War II, when first it had to fend off Soviets trying to re-annex a nation that had declared independence just 2 decades before. Then it found itself overrun by Nazis. By 1944, when this story is set, Hitler's armies were in retreat, their war all but lost. Yet as they were forced homeward from the battle zones of Lapland by Allied forces, they were determined to destroy everything in their path. It is amid those stark northernmost landscapes that we meet a man who's decided to leave the war behind him for good. Alone, but for his horse and dog, this grizzled prospector, Jorma Tommila, is panning and digging for gold. Indeed, he finds a fat vein, his good fortune resulting in a hefty bag of nuggets. But the war is not done with him yet. Back on the road with that loot, he encounters a substantial German squad encompassing tank, troops, and captives. A half-dozen grim-looking young Finnish women, led by glint-eyed Bruno, Aksel Hennie, and sleazy subordinate Wolf, Jack Doolan. While they've laid waste to local residents just because, they seem inclined to spare this old man who looks half dead anyhow until his mineral stash is discovered. These pickings should be easy, but the gray-bearded relic turns out to be a startlingly nimble, resourceful, and lethal adversary who dispatches Axis personnel like a patio zapper does mosquitoes. They soon realize they've stumbled upon one Tommi, reputed to have taken 300-plus Russian soldiers' lives after the Red Army killed his family. They dubbed him the Immortal for his seeming invincibility, which is rapidly proven here to be no myth. Still, despite skyrocketing casualties and official orders to reverse course, greed drives Bruno to continue pursuit. Proceeding in chaptered episodes with titles like Scorched Earth and Kill 'Em All, of about 10 minutes each, Sisu resembles nothing so much as a live-action Roadrunner cartoon, albeit with considerably more graphic gore. Each offers a set piece in which a Tommi turns preposterous odds to his advantage, whether in a minefield, surviving a hanging, or clinging to the outside of an airplane. The combination of deadpan tenor, our hero is so laconic, he doesn't speak a single word until the fade-out, and extreme violence played as precise slapstick manages to avoid monotony through Hillander's dexterous handling. It also renders any quibble's plausibility moot. Like Tarantino's Bastards, without all the yada-yada, this is no history lesson, but purely a fantasy against bona fide evildoers. There are certainly no good Nazis here to feel sorry for. And yes, the captive, presumably raped women, do get to exact their own special revenge. Sisu's outre fun is accentuated by all the first-class design contributors, from Kjell Lagerus' very handsome, though never prettified photography, and Juho Virolainen's razor-sharp editing, to the range of viscerally impressive stunt and FX work. Juri Seppa and Tuomas Wainola's original score incorporates diverse influences while principally evoking the classic Lone Gunman cool of Morricone's spaghetti western soundtracks. Among visuals, one notable cineast in-joke is a climactic homage to Dr. Strangelove. Performances are equally on target, archetypal without caricature. The action itself provides cartoonishness enough. Veteran lead actor Tommila's son Onni returns from starring juvenile turns in both the director's prior films, though his role here, like all those not previously mentioned, is a relatively minor one. In truth, the entire movie feels like a non-stop 90-minute trailer crammed with relentless spectacle. Many reviewers have compared it to Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, and those parallels are spot on. The excessive bloodshed, the narrative rhythm, and of course the sheer number of Nazis being slaughtered in the most ruthless, sadistic ways imaginable. Let's be honest, there's an undeniable satisfaction in watching Nazis meet their gruesome ends, isn't there? At the heart of it is a Tommi Korpi, a solitary drifter scouring the remote wilderness of northern Finland for gold in the dying days of World War II. When fortune finally smiles on him, he loads up his haul and intends to quietly return to civilization, but his plans derail when a Nazi platoon discovers his treasure and decides to take it. What they don't realize is Korpi isn't some helpless recluse. He is an unyielding battle hail, hard-hardened force of nature, so resilient that only the uniquely finished word Sisu comes close to describing him. Like Tarantino's film, this story demands the audience suspend disbelief, because a Tommi doesn't just fight, he endures. Like John Rambo fused with the unstoppable T-1000 from Terminator 2. Whether gunned down by tanks, drowned underwater, or surviving airplane crashes, he emerges virtually untouched. Realistic? Absolutely not. Thrilling? Without question. And when seen in the packed theater full of rowdy horror fans, it becomes an unforgettable ride. Sisu 2022 is a Finnish action film my wife and I caught in theaters last night. Its setting is Finland, 1944, with World War II nearing its end and retreating, Nazis scorching the land behind them. A reclusive gold prospector strikes it rich. But when the Germans attempt to rob him, they soon learn their mistake. Directed by Jilari. Hellander, Rare Exports. The movie features Jorma Tommila, Rare Exports. Aksel Hennie the Martian, Jack Doolan the Boys, Mimosa Willamo Aurora and Tatu. Sino Salo the Unknown Soldier. Visually, the film is outstanding, crisp. Cinematography, stunning landscapes, authentic costumes, and grim, war-torn set pieces. Every action sequence, stunt, special effect, and brutal kill is executed at the highest level, pure 1010 entertainment. Corp is a protagonist you can't help but cheer for, and the villains are equally detestable. The plot moves swiftly, though some moments, such as the prolonged underwater survival or the outrageous airplane scene, push credibility, even if the final showdown is spectacular. The dialogue occasionally drifts into cheesy territory, but the banter between soldiers often lands as darkly comedic and surprisingly fun. According to Algis Manova's BBC article, Sisu, the Finnish art of inner strength, the term Sisu cannot be directly translated, but it embodies endurance, grit, and dignity against overwhelming odds. Helander captures this essence perfectly in his gritty World War II revenge tale. Tommi, scarred by years of fighting, already has a reputation as a one-man army who decimated Soviets and Nazis alike before. Turning to prospecting. Accompanied by his loyal dog, he strikes gold only to be robbed by SS Commander Bruno, Aksel Hennie, and his men, who also enslave and abuse Finnish women. After being hanged and left for dead, Tommi somehow claws back from the brink and hunts them down, rescuing captives and reclaiming what is his. This vengeful saga echoes the likes of Mad Max, John Wick, and Rambo, yet surpasses them in sheer brutality and mythic determination at only 91 minutes. Sisu is lean, ferocious, bloody, and uncompromising, an outrageous war survival spectacle that lives up to its name. In the end, viewers can't help but root for Tommi, as his relentless fight never falters, with Helander ensuring the suspense, pace, and intensity never lose their grip. The action is certainly excessive for any single man, but the sheer absurdity becomes entertaining in its own right. I initially skipped the press screening of Jalmari Helander's action-packed thriller and only later gave it a chance after hearing positive feedback, which I doubted at first once it hit digital platforms. To my surprise, it turned out to be quite engaging, filled with some fierce action sequences, though at times it feels like the filmmakers indulged too heavily in cinematic license for a story grounded in human endurance, set against the harsh backdrop of Finnish Lapland during the Second World War. The narrative follows an ex-commando living in isolation who stumbles upon gold. Yet selling it isn't easy when predators circle like vultures. After passing one unit of soldiers, he's stopped by another, sparking a violent conflict. Despite his age, the old man proves tougher than anyone expects, outmatching even the youngest soldiers in sheer resilience. The bloodshed is relentless, and his refusal to quit drives the plot forward. He slips away after the first clash only to be caught later, with the story unfolding as his determined battle to reclaim his stolen fortune. Honestly, Sisu often feels overblown, action extravaganza too unbelievable for a single elderly man. The protagonist survives countless brutal beatings, while his enemies fall easily, which creates an imbalance that robs the narrative of realism. The plot itself has little substance, though the screenplay works surprisingly well considering the lack of depth. What shines consistently are the fight scenes, which deliver entertainment in abundance, though they elevate the hero into something mythic rather than mortal. Jorma Tommila handles the lead role impressively, while the supporting cast performs decently. Helander delivers a movie worth a one-time watch, though it comes with certain caveats if it's to earn a place on your list. At its core, this over-the-top old man action film is about a lone prospector who discovers gold in Finland's barren wilderness during the waning days of World War II, only to be targeted by a Nazi platoon eager to rob him. Naturally, their plan backfires spectacularly. Designed for a lean crew in remote settings, Sisu 2022 begins with a stripped-down approach, opening with 30 minutes free of dialogue, establishing the protagonist as a man who speaks rarely, if at all. In fact, one could imagine the entire story told without words, since most of the spoken lines add little characters, converse in English as a standing for German, but their dialogue typically just reiterates what we already see on screen. The atmosphere brims with foreboding during the calm before the carnage, evoking the build-up scene in John Wick 2014, setting expectations for a sleek choreographed action ride filled with raw stunts. Yet, the film quickly makes clear that it prioritizes bursts of shocking brutality over fluid choreography, evolving into something closer to a survival story. If clarity falters, gore makes up for it. The violence is merciless and excessive, sometimes even uncomfortable, but mostly delivered for amusement rather than reflection. That tone extends throughout as the World War II setting serves merely as a backdrop for a deliberately exaggerated tale. The movie knows it's outrageous, self-aware enough to embrace its silliness without parodying itself. Despite its rough edges, the film remains an engrossing watch, offering straightforward, entertaining genre cinema that does exactly what it promises. On the surface, Sisu couldn't be more simple. In 1944, a Finnish commando prospecting for gold is robbed and left for dead by Nazis, only to rise again, surviving punishment that should kill him, while unleashing increasingly violent and absurd retribution in his mission to reclaim what's his. The escalation grows so extreme that the movie takes on the quality of a modern myth, a legendary tale transposed into wartime Finland, instead of some ancient setting. In that sense, it carries a faint undertone of allegory, offering at least a glimmer of meaning beneath its explosive, outrageous spectacle. Alternatively, one can simply sit back and enjoy the raw, visceral thrills the movie has to offer, because there's plenty of exaggerated grindhouse-style gore that goes completely over the top, yet remains entertaining most of the time. The protagonist barely utters a word and endures staggering amounts of pain, while the antagonists are cartoonishly wicked but soft targets, making way for numerous brutal, straightforward, blood-soaked encounters. I recall many people once drawing parallels between Nicolas Cage's Pig and John Wick comparison. I never found convincing, but if someone labeled Sisu as John Wick set during World War II, I'd easily agree with that. Description. Honestly, the only other fictional lead I've seen withstand this much sheer punishment is Jack Bauer from 24, who went through 8 full seasons, plus half of another of torment. Whereas here, Tommi seems to endure half a dozen rounds of hell within just a 90-minute runtime. Admittedly, the film doesn't have a lot of substance to revisit, so I doubt I'd rewatch it anytime soon, but those 90 minutes were a blast, filled with the simple joy of watching an old man obliterate. Nuts is something Indiana Jones 5 completely failed to deliver. Since I went in blind without watching a single trailer, I truly had no clue what I was about to witness. And I'm glad for that, because the surprises kept coming. Tommi, played by Jorma Tommila, is a former soldier, living a solitary life with just his horse and loyal dog on his farm. Upon unearthing a fortune in gold, he packs it up and begins a trip to the buff, only to be confronted by a group of Nazis. Once they discover his treasure, they intend to kill him and steal it, though they soon realize they've gravely underestimated him. What follows is Tommi's savage retaliation in ways I never anticipated. The combat sequences are ferocious, relentless, and brilliantly executed. Jorma Tommila delivers a powerhouse performance, reminding me of Bob Odenkirk's surprising Turn-In Nobody, another film that caught me off guard. In fact, Sisu hits with shock after shock, refusing to let up. Realistically speaking, none of it is plausible, nor is it meant to be. The film thrives on showing merciless Nazis getting the retribution they deserve, and watching Tommi unleash hell on them is pure catharsis. Of course, it's laughably illogical that trained soldiers constantly miss their shots at him, but that plot contrivance is what allows the carnage to work. The final act is completely impossible by any real-world standard, but my God, it's entertaining. Visually, Sisu is striking, boasting gorgeous cinematography and an excellent score. I also appreciated how the story line tied vengeance into a full circle. Not only did Tommi exact revenge, but The female captives also seize their moment of justice. Absolutely brilliant. In fact, Tom Cruise doesn't even come close to Jorma Tommila here. Imagine throwing Mission Impossible, John Wick, Indiana Jones, and The Raid into a blender, then letting Finnish filmmakers shape the outcome. That's the essence of Sisu. Truth be told, I've enjoyed a much higher percentage of Finnish films than American ones. They somehow blend gritty realism, dark humor, and wild fantasy into compelling, thoroughly entertaining stories. Here, retreating German soldiers foolishly pick a fight with a relentless old man and pay dearly for it. The movie swings between shockingly gruesome and slightly humorous, with certain scenes like the Wonder Woman-esque moment early on, clearly played with tongue-in-cheek exaggeration. The toughness of the main character escalates rapidly from believable to implausible to outright mythical. That shift was slightly disappointing, since it came close to being grounded for at least 15 minutes before diving into the realm of pure fantasy. Some flaws stand out too, like a truckload of background characters who serve no purpose the entire film. Still, this isn't the first dull, outrageous ride from the Tommila-Helander collaboration. Their 2010 film Rare Exports was also absurd yet highly enjoyable. I'm now tempted to track down their entire body of work. Considering its modest $6 million budget, Sisu is an excellent accomplishment. In short, it's extremely fun, stylishly crafted, and far more polished than many bloated Hollywood blockbusters, despite being just as forgettable. That said, the biggest issue is how utterly ludicrous and unrealistic the plot is. I don't usually demand airtight realism in their action films, but here it often feels like the writers assumed audiences wouldn't notice or care about glaring absurdities. To make matters worse, the actors playing Nazis are painfully unconvincing with wooden performances that even extend to their dialogue. Hearing German soldiers randomly curse in English like shouting asterisk off comes across unintentionally. Hilarious when it's clearly meant to be. Menacing. The lead actor himself is decent enough, but his single brooding expression quickly grows stale. Ultimately, it failed to deliver the war drama I was hoping for, ending up more of a far-fetched spectacle than a grounded story. What a misfire. So was it really worth watching? The explosions are entertaining enough, but when the fighting and chaos break out, none of it feels remotely believable. The absurdity of these action sequences makes them unintentionally comical. The Finnish director behind this work might be one of the least competent from that country. At least I hope so, because if this is representative of Finnish cinema, then I truly feel sorry for them. Still, in an era where fascism is alarmingly resurfacing, there's something undeniably satisfying about watching a man mercilessly cut down a pack of detestable Nazis. The protagonist here is Sisu, a solitary prospector simply minding his own life who ends up hunted by German soldiers during the final stretch of World War II. He isn't portrayed as a heroic figure. He's not killing Nazis out of duty or justice. Instead, he's a hardened ex-commando who just wants to be left alone, but once forced into conflict, unleashes his lethal abilities in a barrage of bloody, sometimes darkly humorous executions. Essentially, the movie boils down to relentless warrior slaughter Nazis. But then again, what more do you really need? Stories about loners who only seek peace but are dragged into violence are new. However, truly great ones in this vein are rare. Back in the 1960s, Sergio Leone redefined this theme with his legendary Italian westerns, and it seems fitting that today's closest parallel would emerge far from Hollywood in the icy expanse of Lapland. Director Jari Helander has crafted something that feels like an instant cult classic. The script is stripped so bare it could belong on a sandwich menu, yet its blunt simplicity is part of the charm. Set in 1944 as World War II draws to a close, the retreating Nazis scorch Finnish land on their way out. A ruthless SS commander and his platoon stumble upon a lone prospector carrying gold and decide to take it for themselves. What they don't realize is that this quiet man is a no ordinary victim. He's a legend rumored to possess almost mythic immortality, and once provoked, he refuses to ever back down. That relentless determination is captured in the Finnish word Sisu, drawing influence from First Blood. The film unleashes an outrageous torrent of violence so excessive it makes even Rambo look tame by comparison. Every Nazi is dispatched in grotesque, over-the-top ways, while the protagonist himself survives the most brutal attacks imaginable, his near indestructibility fueling the madness. The climax reaches ludicrously unbelievable levels, yet it's a wildly entertaining spectacle, especially for those who take pleasure in watching cruel Nazis obliterated across the Finnish wilderness. After all, who wouldn't? Released in 2022, Sisu is pure blood-soaked entertainment. Its premise may be simple, but the execution elevates it far above mere pulp. It feels almost as if the director watched Quentin Tarantino's works, particularly Inglourious Bastards, and distilled their best violent, cathartic elements into this movie. At just 90 minutes long, it's briskly paced, relentless, and never dull. Imagine John. Rambo fused with John Wick, only transplanted into World War II Finland, and you'll have a fair idea of what to expect. Bloody, violent, darkly comic, and explosively fun. In the story, during 1944, Finnish warrior Tommi, played by Jorma, discovers gold and sets off to secure his newfound fortune. On his journey, he collides with retreating Nazis who foolishly attempt to rob him. What they don't know is that Tommi is a master of deadly combat, trained to annihilate anyone who stands in his way, and he proceeds to cut through them with terrifying precision. Though the film's release was limited and it went mostly unnoticed in theaters, it has since gained cult status and surprising praise from critics, leaving me wishing I had seen it on the big screen. At its core, it's exactly what it sets out to be, a brutal Nazi slaying spectacle with shades of Tarantino, but delivered in a sharper, less pretentious fashion. Tommila embodies the gruff, silent, stoic action hero perfectly, like a Finnish John Wayne, while Aksel Hennie gives a grotesque, sin-stealing performance as the sadistic Nazi leader. It's unfortunate that the deeper essence of Sisu isn't explored more thoroughly. Beyond its extravagant showcase of blood and gore, there isn't much that lingers in memory. Yet, for audiences who enjoy over-the-top violent spectacles, this one makes a fitting recommendation. Keeping its tongue planted firmly in cheek from beginning to end, the film aims to reflect light, nature, and rugged spirit, whether across fields, moors, or the highland plateaus of Jade. Veniscandia delivered as a near scriptless Finnish production, overloaded, with international actors, all speaking English with a Scandinavian inflection. It's well-crafted and competently made, and I can't fault them for borrowing this framework since it supports the portions of the narrative. Everything else is pure unfiltered Sisu executed through relentless carnage and unstoppable tide of gore and vengeance. Cinematic sensations unfold again and again, with special effects hitting the perfect balance while the story barrels ahead without pause in a whirlwind of absurdity. Is it realistic? Not at all, but it's undeniably entertaining, offering shocks and surprises that bring a wicked grin even to the grumpiest viewer. Not everyone will appreciate it, but for lovers of outrageous B-grade cinema, it's a strong recommendation. And no, not the Biggies. Sisu itself is an ultra-violent Finnish action tale set in the final stretch of World War II, where a battle-scarred veteran played by Jorma single-handedly slaughter waves of Nazis while clinging to the gold he has discovered. Dialogue is nearly absent. Tommila doesn't utter a word until the last moment of the film, leaving blood, guts, and torn flesh to dominate the screen. It's just as nonsensical as the John Wick franchise. Yet the execution is impeccable, resembling an adults-only Roadrunner cartoon drenched in gore. Whether Joari Helander could ever handle a romantic comedy is questionable, but within this genre, he's nearly untouchable. One could even argue that this is a brilliant specimen of its type, though it's baffling how something this soaked in brutality managed a 15 certificate. while Poor Things received an 18 for its sexual content, go figure, as an exploitation flick set in World War II Finland. It begins with a solitary miner, again Tommila uncovering a stash of gold, loading the treasure onto his horse and accompanied by his loyal dog. He sets off down a road where he passes Nazis, burning and looting in. They retreat. Initially, nothing happens until stragglers attempt to seize his prize, only to be dispatched in spectacularly violent fashion. The gunfire alerts the main platoon, who soon return to investigate, leading to a vicious cat-and-mouse confrontation. We learned Tommila has earned the nickname Immortal for his legendary battles against the Russians, and he now rolls up his sleeves for another merciless fight, reclaiming his gold and annihilating the Germans en route to their planned escape plane. It's a lean, well-paced BEM movie masterclass, the kind of film where if Helander were asked about Tarantino and Glorious Bastards, his reply might simply be, "Hold my beer." The ride is both funny and wildly entertaining, peppered with moments of dark comedy, like the Wonder Woman shield gag that lets our hero walk unharmed through a rain of bullets. Still, one might miss the zombie Nazis from Dead Snow, so be warned, this is not a serious war picture. But if you're craving a dish of spaghetti western madness served with steaming cheese, this movie might be exactly your flavor. Production values are solid, acting competent, though it doesn't feel destined to reach cult status as some claim. For many viewers, one watch will be enough. Personally, I doubt I'll revisit it, whereas I've rewatched Dead Snow several times. In the end, Sisu suffers from repetition, with only a handful of standout moments worth remembering. At its core, though, it paints a portrait of a man who embodies the unyielding spirit of his homeland. A Tommy Corpy, almost indestructible, unwavering in his fight. The script positions him as a living symbol of Finland itself, unyielding, steadfast, and immovable against its wartime enemies. Against the backdrop of World War II chaos, his resilience becomes the metaphor, a cinematic reminder of a nation's refusal to break under pressure, dressed in blood, fire, and myth. A nation that never surrendered its sovereignty, not even in the bleakest and most desperate circumstances, always standing firm against the harshest and most merciless assaults. A Tommy's journey as a character reflects the same endurance and unyielding spirit that Finland itself is known for, turning him into a beacon of strength and encouragement for his people. Jamari Hollander Sisu serves as a salute to that resilience, paying homage to both soldiers and ordinary citizens who defended their homeland against invaders and preserved their freedom. Even if one ignores the deeper symbolism and metaphorical weight, the movie on its own is a thrilling watch. The script is lean, the rhythm is steady, and most importantly, it delivers unapologetic, raw violence in a strangely stylish and almost exotic manner. While it sometimes feels excessive, I still admired the ambition behind it. Few things in cinema are as satisfying as villains being Nazis. An easy way to ensure audiences root for the hero. Add a loyal dog into the picture, and it's impossible not to be on his side. Personally, it ticks many boxes of what I love in movies. A lone Avenger delivering relentless vengeance is always gratifying to witness. The fact that the violence has no restrictions is even better. Of course, one must suspend disbelief since the film portrays what must be the most incompetent group of Nazis ever, unable to shoot straight even at close range. This absurdity is probably its weakest point. Yet, if you can overlook that flaw, Sisu provides an exhilarating experience. It presents itself as a historical action piece trying to channel John Wick, a lone warrior taking down his enemies in savage, bloody fashion. Unfortunately, it falls short of reaching that standard. The story is simple and somewhat thin, following a prospector who has his gold stolen by Nazis and sets off on a relentless path to reclaim it. The performances are serviceable, though the main protagonist barely speaks. And while the action is bloody and brutal, the set pieces lack real creativity or excitement. The Visual effects are solid but not remarkable, the score forgettable, and the directing uninspired, leaving the impression that the film tries to be a World War II version of John Wick, but doesn't quite succeed. Market it as a kind of finish, Gold Digger John Wick versus Nazi Rampage. It indeed feels like a pulpy B-movie with an enticing central idea full of imaginative kills and over-the-top action. Yet it struggles to rise above mediocrity as it trudges through its story. Its very title, drawn from a Finnish concept with no direct English equivalent, embodies ideas of courage, grit, determination, and toughness traits that Jorma Tommila clearly represents. A once-retired soldier turned solitary prospector. His peaceful life is shattered when his discovery of gold draws the attention of Aksel Hennie's ruthless Nazi commander and his brutal troops. Helander, known for high-concept yet uneven films like Rare Exports and Big Game, certainly knows his way around the action genre. And here he stages several memorable sequences, whether it's creating a clever underwater escape or unleashing chaos in a deadly minefield. These moments will no doubt thrill action fans. Yet the film falters in giving us a protagonist we deeply connect with. Unlike iconic figures such as John Wick, Rama from The Raid, or Tyler from Extraction, Tommi lacks the charisma and emotional weight that makes audiences fully invest. While it's always enjoyable to see sadistic Nazis meet gruesome Sisu, inability to make us truly care for its lead weakens its impact, particularly in the final act, which feels lackluster compared to earlier highlights. At just 90 minutes, it's a quick and gritty dose of action that could easily gain cult status thanks to its setting and concept, but it ultimately misses the chance to become something exceptional within its genre. Final thoughts. Instead of being an unforgettable masterpiece, Sisu ends up as a film with striking moments, scattered throughout rather than a cohesive whole. It comes close to delivering a fresh action icon, but stumbles as often as its sources, ultimately leaving the experience as a solid diversion, but nothing groundbreaking. The movie had been promoted everywhere on the London Act Underground, and seeing those posters constantly, an image of a lone man with a knife facing down a crowd of Nazis, was enough to spark my curiosity. The premise seemed straightforward yet intriguing. A Finnish prospector hunted by Nazis, eager to steal his newly discovered gold during the dying days of World War II. Luckily, my local Australian cinema gave it a run, and I seized the chance. Some people described it as a mix of Rambo, Tarantino, and Nazis. Considering Tarantino has already tackled Nazis before, I found it more accurate to call it a Tarantino style. Rambo. The Tao Sisu itself is said to be a Finnish term that cannot be directly translated, but it conveys a kind of fierce grit and unwavering determination. The director, being Finnish, pushes that idea to extreme limits, crafting a hero who seems impossible to kill no matter what horrors are inflicted upon him. Yes, it borders on absurdity, but ultimately that's all you need to know. It's a film about one relentless man fighting Nazis who want his gold. And since the war was ending, those Nazis were desperate, dreaming of gold as their ticket out, their chance at survival or comfort after everything collapses. Yet the film also makes clear that Nazis cannot even trust one another because selfish survival trumps loyalty. Interestingly, it's not just a Tommi who embodies determination. Several others, like the captive women crammed into the back of a truck, reflect the same resolve. Their situation is grimly obvious: escape or endure being degraded and abused. Still, the gold miner remains the heart of the black tale. His backstory is tragic. The Soviets slaughtered his family, driving him into isolation. He once served in the army, but he was too uncontrollable, so they let him go rogue, waging his own war. The movie's exposition sometimes grated on me, leaning into cliché, but overall it delivered a stylishly brutal ride. For me, it came across as one of those hidden gems, proof that worthwhile cinema can be found far beyond Hollywood. The story unfolds against the backdrop of 1944 as the Nazis scorched their way out of Finland. At Tommi, Korpi, played by Jorma Tommila, a former commando, has withdrawn into Lapland, prospecting for gold after losing his loved ones to the Soviets. Striking a motherlode, he sets off on horseback to carry his treasure home, but crosses paths with a German death squad commanded by the ruthless Bruno Helldorf, Aksel Hennie. Once they realize he carries gold, they move to kill him, only to be dismantled one by lethal resourcefulness. Helldorf, however, refuses to relent. Driving the relentless pursuit, Sisu is the third feature from cult Finnish filmmaker Jalmari Heilander. Known for Rare Exports, A Christmas Tale, and Big Game. Having abandoned another project, during Co-19, Heilander conceived Sisu, blending influences from First Blood and the legendary Finnish sniper Simo Häyhä, who fought the Red Army. The film radiates passion and may well stand as Heilander's finest work to date. At its essence, Sisu is a Western cloaked as a war story. Tommila embodies the archetypal silent anti-hero, speaking almost nothing throughout, yet commanding presence through his performance and Heilander's visual storytelling. The film wastes no time plunging into its hyper-violent core, offering fight scenes that are unapologetically gory, dazzling, and creatively savage. Meanwhile, Aksel Hennie's portrayal of Helldorf gifts the story with a memorably loathsome villain, the kind of figure you can't wait to see destroyed. Of course, it was absurd and entertaining. Yet, the film could have been much stronger if the director had avoided leaning so heavily on the constant logic-defying overblown clashes and bloody brawls, and instead committed to a consistent tone and theme while expanding the storyline rather than padding it with unnecessary chapter breaks. After a while, the non-stop outlandishness makes you wonder if you're watching a war parody instead of a serious narrative. A bit more dialogue and character development would have added much-needed depth. Even with its short 91-minute runtime and steady pacing, there's barely enough substance here to sustain a short film, let alone a feature. At least the camera work, visual effects, and blood-soaked set pieces were first-rate. All the same, it delivers as a popcorn-fueled action flick. Go catch Sisu in theaters on April 28th. Jalmari Heilander's newest film, Sisu, is a brutal or raided trek through Lapland during the closing stages of World War II. It stars Jorma Tommila as a Tommy, a once deadly soldier, now living alone as a miner with only his loyal horse and dog for company. When a Tommy stumbles upon a massive vein of gold, he loads up his treasure and heads for the nearest town to cash in. Along the way, he collides with a ruthless Nazi battalion commanded by SS Obersturmführer Bruno Aksel Hennie. They plot to kill him and take his gold, but they fail to grasp that they've provoked a legendary warrior who will stop at nothing to reclaim what's his. Heilander divides Atomi's violent odyssey into multiple chapters, each designed to outdo the one before. With Kilogaru's sweeping cinematography, capturing the raw beauty of Lapland, the movie gains both grandeur and a heightened sense of spectacle amid the carnage. The Nazis are portrayed as outright monsters from the moment they appear, ensuring audiences cheer their savage and inventive deaths. Their transport full of captive women only underscores their depravity while amplifying the hero's mythic stature. Atomi, dubbed the Immortal, embodies the very spirit of Sisu, a Finnish term, meaning relentless grit and unimaginable willpower. The movie cares little for historical authenticity or the mental toll of war, choosing instead to revel in an escalating symphony of violence, echoing American action staples like Rambo or the tank-fueled chaos of Mad Max. Styled like a classic Western, the barren finished tundra becomes its lawless frontier, with a Tommy cast as the lone avenger against marauding oppressors. Visually, the film embraces the epic widescreen aesthetic. Legaru's lensing magnifying the vast landscapes, while the extensive effects add a surreal edge. Complemented by Juri Sepp and Tuis Winilow's score, the film thrusts us into Finland 1944, where a Tommy veteran commando turned prospector strikes gold only to have it stolen by a retreating German platoon. But this hardened survivor, credited with over 300 Soviet kills, is no ordinary man. Even when gunned down with machine fire or faced with a tank, he seems untouchable. Nothing can stop this one-man army from taking back his treasure. He demonstrates almost superhuman resilience, able to remain underwater for extraordinary stretches, survive a hanging, and even walk away from a catastrophic plane crash from an astonishing altitude. Imagine a hybrid of Rambo, Machete, and Jason Voorhees, and you'll have a sense of his indestructibility. Honestly, the Rambo series seemed over the top, yet compared to this film, they appear almost grounded. As the story progresses, the absurdity and sheer implausibility only increase. Strangely, all the Germans converse in fluent English, though several of their accents clearly don't resemble authentic German speech. Still, the cinematography is spectacular, filmed amidst the stocky beauty of Lapland's landscapes. Although classified as a BBFC-15, the picture revels in extreme violence and buckets of gore, leaving splatter enthusiasts thoroughly satisfied. The protagonist, Tommi, remains completely silent until the closing act, which adds an air of mystery to his character. Perhaps the underlying message is simply about perseverance, never giving up regardless of the odds. While that's a worthy lesson, the film's exaggerated silliness prevents it from being taken seriously. It could have been more polished, yet it remains undeniably entertaining. From its opening narration and segmented chapters to its tightly executed 90-minute runtime, Sisu is fully aware of what it wants to be: a pulp-styled action spectacle that thrives on the timeless appeal of watching a World War II version of John Wick mow down Nazis. Jorma Tommila's performance is nearly wordless, but his silence speaks volumes, portraying a tortured man yearning for peace yet driven to unleash his fury in a blood-drenched storm. Opposite him, Aksel Hennie makes for a compelling antagonist, selfish today, the core, only resorting to loud outbursts when his authority crumbles. Marie Helander directs with precision, embracing the filth, the carnage, and the forward driving momentum that defines the movie. The sound design deserves special mention too. Each blow, explosion, and brutal impact is heightened by visceral effects that match the meticulous practical makeup. I watched Sisu starring Jorma Tommila, man without a past, big game Aksel Hennie, The Martian, The Cloverfield Paradox, Jack Doolan, The Boys, Cemetery Junction, and Mimosa Willamo, Aurora Headfirst. Few people I've spoken to have even heard of it, and I only discovered it through a trailer about a month earlier. The title itself, Sisu, is a Finnish concept meaning relentless courage and unshakable determination against overwhelming adversity, an idea Jorma's character embodies. He plays a former soldier-turned-prospector who discovers gold in northern Finland during 1944 as this World War II winds down and knots his retreat. Aksel portrays an SS officer retreating with his unit, torching villages, and abducting women along the back way. He already has 6 captives when the story begins. Jack plays his second in command, while Mimosa portrays one of the enslaved women. Inevitably, Jorma crosses paths with Aksel and chaos erupts. The Nazi commander covets Jorma's gold as a retirement cushion, but the prospector refuses to hand it over. What follows is an outrageous barrage of violence with dismembered bodies flying across the screen. At one point, a Nazi wonders aloud whether Jorma might actually be immortal, given their constant failed attempts to kill him, only for Mimosa's character to retort that he isn't immortal. He just flatly refuses to die. With such moments, the film seems destined for cult status. Set against the backdrop of autumn 1944 in Finnish Lapland, where retreating Nazis employ a scorched earth strategy of destruction, executions, and enslavement, the stark scenery almost becomes a character in itself, evoking landscapes reminiscent of Connemara and the burn or the bleak imagery of black. 47. The narrative begins with a prospect of striking gold only to clash with a platoon of SS soldiers eager to steal his treasure, quickly realizing they've tangled with someone beyond ordinary. From the brutal opening kill when he drives a dagger clean through a soldier's skull to battles fought against tanks, underwater enemies, and foes in the skies, the film transforms into a symphony of inventive savagery. Like a Finnish superhero, he deflects bullets with his gold pan and tosses mines that obliterate enemy troops. The end result is a gloriously bloody, over-the-top adventure evoking shades of Inglourious Bastards, tinged with the absurd satire of Doctor Strange love and the survivalist grit of First Blood. The cast delivers across the board. Joyla as the unstoppable Finn, Aksel Hennie as the ruthless officer, Jack Doolan as his loyal sergeant, and Mimosa Willamo as the defiant captive who inspires resistance. Written and directed by Xiaomari Helander, the movie ultimately delivers exactly what its premise suggests: Finland's take on a John Wick style bloodbath. It may have exceeded my expectations by blending pulpy absurdity with stark brutality, and though different from what I anticipated, I thoroughly enjoyed the ride. Action-packed and gruesome, it's about a soldier who finds gold and refuses to allow a squad of Nazis to take it from it. I feel like that was a bigger metaphor than I got out of it, because all I got was a big Heathy man meal. The movie is also visually attractive with the beautiful Finland backdrop contradicting the dirty sodders during the last days of World War II. Finally, just a great original flick, not a remake or a sequel or anything of that nature, just a great show from start to finish. Is it over the top? Of course, but it is extremely entertaining. So refreshing in today's current unoriginal Hollywood. The pace, grade, story, and photography worked in harmony together perfectly. It knew what his was and wasn't ashamed to exemplify every angle of it. Very well done. If you like watching Norweg's satanic embodiment films, the lead actor completely excels in every aspect of conveying so many emotions, strengths, pain, frustration, and grief, literally, without using a word. His performance alone should get this film recognition. The action and story arc are likewise enjoyable and pack a punch. The scenes are fresh and very unique. I was impressed by the totally insane ways this character saved himself and dispatched his foes. I cannot rave enough about this film. It is what the world needed. I loved it. Sisu is a film that's utterly ridiculous, but it's also self-aware. It merely wants to build a one-man killing machine like John Wick, another Lionsgate franchise with the stylistic choices of a spaghetti western, basically plowing his way through a troop of Nazi savages. The plot is pretty basic in its segregation into different chapters, while somewhat uneven, helps invoke the feeling of reading a graphic novel. The cinematography, too, is such, featuring panoramic Finnish landscapes that are simply breathtaking. The action is solidly staged. The explosions especially are just incredible to look at. The combat set pieces are also neat, with knives being plunged into heads, limbs cracking, bullet shards piercing through human flesh, and even sucking oxygen from a slit throat. The writing also gives the women their moments to shine in a couple of hoot-worthy scenes. Jorma Tommila, who plays the Rambo-like protagonist with little to no dialogue, is convincing as the retired commando turned gold miner. His sexy generian bike looks and physique totally fit the character, and he can pull off a mean stare when he needs to. The makers could have kept the final chapter in English too, like the rest of it. Also, the writing at times conveniently protects the protagonist even without external aid, and when we see it happening in successive scenes, logic is immediately thrown out the window. Sisu is tailor-made for the kind of audience that absolutely loves to indulge in brutally gory action. Sisu takes place at the end of World War II during the 1944-1945 Lapland War. An agreement between Finland and the Allies required the Finns to sever diplomatic ties with Nazi Germany, prompting the Germans to begin withdrawing their troops to Norway. In the movie, a Finnish ex-soldier turned gold digger makes the discovery of a lifetime. But unfortunately, the retreating Germans find out and try to steal the gold from him. The film has a somewhat eerie mood that resonates most strongly with Finns and those familiar with Finnish culture. The main character barely speaks throughout the movie, and when he finally does, it's brief, but what he says is a perfect example of Finnish humor. The story is all about Sisu. a uniquely finished concept of absolute perseverance, which drives our protagonist to reclaim the gold the Nazis stole from him no matter what. The movie is split into chapters in a style reminiscent of Kill Bill. In fact, I feel the film draws inspiration from Quentin Tarantino in several ways. The eerie atmosphere, the cinematography, the color palette, the quirky characters and their sparse dialogue, the stylized violence, and so on. The good news is the movie never feels boring. It's reasonably short and constantly packed with action. I would certainly recommend watching it. I had fun watching this, therefore I recommend it. However, you should know that it's not remotely realistic and convincing. In fact, Superman is more vulnerable than our hero here. This doesn't look like a comedy, but it feels like a comedy. At its essence, this film leans entirely into comedy. For a runtime of 90 minutes, the pacing doesn't quite work, often dragging instead of moving smoothly. The story feels thin, even naive in its treatment, though it remains entertaining enough if you're willing to embrace it. Of course, a total suspension of disbelief is necessary, but those who appreciate the genre will find enjoyment in it. The central hero is immediately likable, and you can't help but support him throughout his journey. The fight sequences and action deliver energy, and while the characters come across as exaggerated and almost cartoon-like, the acting is convincing. Ultimately, there's always a certain satisfaction in seeing villains meet violent ends. Sisu is a Finnish action drama with a strong historical fiction flavor, drawing clear inspiration from Nicholas Winding Refn and Quentin Tarantino. The film presents a stoic, solitary, and rough-edged protagonist facing relentless threats, reminiscent of Valhalla Rising. Structurally, the story is divided into chapters, much like The Hateful Eight, with each segment introducing fresh characters, new environments, and sudden bursts of graphic violence. At the heart of the narrative lies a former Finnish soldier who, after losing his family, lives in solitude in Lapland. His life changes when he discovers gold and sets off toward the nearest town to trade it for wealth. However, a group of Nazi soldiers crosses his path, turning what should be a simple task into an almost impossible ordeal. The film excels in several areas. First, the sweeping, remote landscapes of Lapland are breathtaking, perfect for those who admire the raw wilderness of the north. Next, the quiet but hardened protagonist has a rugged charm that earns the audience's empathy, supporting characters ranging from brutal Nazi officers to defiant female captives add layers of tension and variety. The violence is both savage and exaggerated, often staged to elicit nervous laughter, with the river sequences in particular leaving a lasting impression. The final confrontation pushes absurdity to the extreme, but for lovers of the genre, it will spark pure delight. On the downside, the narrative is extremely predictable, recycling familiar tropes that audiences have seen countless times before. Historical accuracy is thrown out without hesitation, and at moments the movie feels more like a live-action video game, evoking the style of Far Cry. In the end, Sisu is best experienced once, preferably in a crowded theater where cinephiles cheer and laugh together. If that isn't possible, then it's worth enjoying with friends and a few good drinks at home. Just be prepared to disengage your critical mind and buckle up for the ride. Once it's over, though, there's little reason to revisit. It isn't the type of movie one would buy or rewatch repeatedly. Rather, it's a brutal but straightforward action spectacle aimed squarely at fans of the genre. Told across 7 chapters, Sisu follows its central figure, the mythic loner who prefers to keep away from the chaos of war. As a gold prospector, his discovery of a fortune prompts a long journey to cash it in. But the Nazis he encounters make the fatal mistake of attempting to steal it. They have no idea of the relentless force they've provoked. And what follows is his ruthless march to annihilate them. The simplicity of the plot combined with the excess of violent kills defines the viewing experience. The climactic showdown, though wildly exaggerated, still delivers the promised fun. Like John Wick, this tale reinforces one lesson: never threaten a man's dog or his gold. The director successfully honors his influences, and the protagonist embodies an unforgettable aura. Stripped down to its core, the story mirrors survival tales like First Blood here. However, it's set in Finland during the dying days of World War II, where a former soldier turned gold miner becomes prey after Nazis rob him and kill his horse. What they fail to realize is that he is no ordinary man, but a legendary Finnish commando once feared by Stalin's Red Army, who nicknamed him Kos the Immortal. Known as a one-man death squad, his reputation precedes him. The result is a film with a bare-bones plot, savage violence, and landscapes as stark and unforgiving as its lead character. The film's action sequences are imaginative, thrilling, and what so many action films forget, genuinely suspenseful. One of the most striking moments comes when the protagonist hides beneath the water, slits a Nazi's throat, and then breathes the stolen air from his victim's lungs so he doesn't have to surface and expose himself to enemy fire. It's this kind of unrestrained creativity from writer and director Jauari Helander, best known for the brilliant Christmas horror comedy Rare Exports, that lifts the movie far above the level of a routine action flick. The plot itself is extremely thin, and the underdeveloped characters are the only real weak spot, but the story serves mostly as a framework for a string of dazzling set pieces. The hero evading a minefield, surviving a hanging lure, or even pursuing a Nazi-filled aircraft in inventive, borderline absurd ways. Sisu is drenched in gore, so it's definitely not a film for everyone. But if you enjoyed the outrageous action style of Nobody, Bullet Train, or The Kingsman, this will absolutely be your kind of movie. And as a bonus, Hollander is reportedly at work on a First Blood prequel. The movie feels a little like what would happen if John Wick were directed by Quentin Tarantino. Though, Tarantino's films usually juggle multiple themes, while this one stays laser-focused. At heart, the story is simple. A former soldier weary of war retreats into the wilderness to live alone, only to strike gold and try to bring it back to civilization. But Nazi forces stand in his way. Yet for them, he turns out to be the greater obstacle. The spectacle is wildly over the top, often bordering on comical, but undeniably entertaining for anyone who enjoys violent cinema. Even the ludicrous underwater scenes are strangely captivating. The cast is largely unfamiliar, but they deliver solid performances backed by strong direction and striking cinematography. The film doesn't really aim to be meaningful, but it's executed with flair and is remotely suitable for the faint of heart. This odd tale of one man against an army of Nazis in the Nordic wilderness is presented in a deliberate cult classic style with a clear emphasis on style over substance. Realism is nowhere in sight. What we're given is closer to a spiritual tale. The hero functions less as a flesh and blood man and more as a symbolic embodiment of every righteous figure who fights against evil. Such personification is rare in Hollywood, but more common in Eastern cinema in films like The Four, Assassins, or Zoo Warriors of the Magic Mountain, which explains the surreal, exaggerated tone here. The filmmakers never pretend otherwise. Everything is heightened, dreamlike, and built around unbelievable feats of endurance and survival. Unlike many Western heroes, descendants of Greek legends who deliberately seek danger, this protagonist does not pursue conflict. He simply endures what comes his way. If you flee from him, he will let you, and unlike in much of Western pop culture, evil does not grant a person lasting power. That's a radical shift from the norm. Here we have a retired soldier attempting to sell his hard-earned gold only to be pursued by greedy Nazis. Yet, he seems virtually unkillable, fighting back relentlessly until he hauls his fortune into the city. From beginning to end, the film is packed with relentless chases and brutal confrontations. A non-stop thriller. The remote landscapes only enhance the atmosphere, transporting the viewer into a rugged world far removed from ordinary life. It is fascinating to watch this one-man army take his revenge and defend himself against overwhelming odds. Many of the Set pieces are intricately staged, with the final chapter being especially memorable. For pure entertainment, it's one of the best in the genre, reminiscent of a Rambo-style film, though bloodier and more savage. Just don't go in expecting seriousness. Fasten your seatbelt, grab your popcorn, and enjoy the ride. Overall, 7/10. It's essentially a spaghetti western reimagined with John Wick style violence, though stripped of the intrigue those films often carry. The acting and action sequences are strong, yet the film feels incomplete overall, almost as if a short concept has been stretched to fill even its 90-minute runtime. The nearly silent lead, character who speaks only when necessary, echoes the spirit of old Western heroes, but his war-weary disillusionment seems drawn more from First Blood. The chase element, along with the subplot involving captured women, gives it shades of Fury Road, though the deeper themes remain barely touched upon. Instead of fully realized figures, we're given flat outlines of characters. And while slow-motion shots and musical cues attempt to tell us what emotions we should feel, they never manage to create much impact within such one-dimensional portrayals. Adding to the oddness is the language choice. English dominates the dialogue unnecessarily, and with only one brief finish scene near the end, the decision comes across as inconsistent and distracting. Still, the film succeeds at delivering tightly staged action set pieces, though many of them are spoiled by the trailer, which dampen my anticipation. At its core, the film positions itself in the superheroic subgenre, except that the immortal doesn't wear a cape or spandex suit, but relies on cunning, pain tolerance, and sheer determination. The Nazi commander even reminded me of a reckless alpha kid from my preschool days. Overconfident, eager for attention, and careless about consequences, which ultimately left him out of his depth. The central tale follows a Finnish prospector who discovers gold and must battle an entire Nazi platoon in trucks with an extra vehicle holding women prisoners and even a Soviet tank disguised as a panzer for cinematic effect. The narrative pushes far beyond realism, and though I wondered whether it was intended as a loose retelling of a Nordic war legend, the protagonist is essentially endowed with superhuman resilience, enduring endless punishment before unleashing revenge with excessive brutality. My biggest complaint, beyond its total lack of realism, lies in the sound typical of modern mainstream cinema, where thunderous effects, glaring music, juvenile humor, and overly clever dialogue have replaced more grounded storytelling once seen in films like Kramer vs. Kramer. Instead, Sisu aligns itself with the loud, spectacle-driven approach of something like Guardians of the Galaxy. Every few years, Hollywood turns out another reminder not to forget about the Nazis, and this entry fits that cycle, portraying their evil and the need to eradicate it. While entertaining in spurts, I found much of the gore excessive, the story reliant on suspension of disbelief and not something I'd revisit. The Germans in Hero mostly converse in English, though. The supposed Russians speak their own tongue, making the choice even stranger. Ultimately, the film seems to frame its protagonist as a kind of Finnish folk myth brought to life. What began as a raw, violent Scandinavian drama devolved into something unintentionally comical, leaving me laughing at its escalating absurdity. My son Jamie, who has an encyclopedic grasp of cinema, helped put the film's intentions into perspective. But my rating reflects how the movie loses its footing. At heart, Sisu is a revenge fantasy where an almost immortal soldier is hunted by Nazis for his gold, dishing out punishment with feral determination. In the end, his only goal is reclaiming the gold, and that drives him to hunt the soldiers down. The plot is that simple. Across the film, his spoken lines hardly reach half a dozen, and the majority of the action unfolds in slow motion. In fact, it isn't just the camera tricks. Characters themselves seem to move and act sluggishly, which conveniently explains how he keeps surviving against all odds. Over and over again, he makes it through impossible battles, largely because the Nazi commander seems determined to duel him slowly rather than simply order a shot fired. Time after time, the villain allows him to escape, to hide, and then attacks again later. The reasoning behind this is never explained, but it's how nearly every encounter is staged. No. One truly tries to kill him, and the antagonists appear, oddly lethargic, even speaking at a strangely slow manner. There's even a sequence where he runs unarmed through an open field. Yet, the sniper, who could easily pick off any other man within 50 meters, somehow fails to hit him. It becomes obvious that the film isn't striving for historical accuracy, but instead plays as a series of revenge-driven confrontations where Nazis are portrayed as incompetent caricatures. Interestingly, the Nazi platoon is depicted behaving more like Soviet troops abducting women for abuse, massacring civilians, pillaging at will. This particular unit seems unhinged and unusually savage compared to historical accounts of most Nazi divisions. They even turn on each other, killing their own men without hesitation, while the most despicable Nazi leader conveniently survives until the end. If the antagonists had been Soviets, such sadistic behavior might feel more consistent, but there are documented cases of Zest divisions engaging in similar atrocities in parts of Europe, especially in occupied regions where the local population wasn't considered Aryan, and they recruited semi-local auxiliaries. German soldiers, particularly those from urban centers, often operated under more structured rules and strict discipline, turning brutal when commanded, while Soviet troops were historically infamous for unchecked savagery encouraged by lax leadership. The film acknowledges the war's final stages, suggesting the Nazis should be preparing for survival. Yet, here they indulge in war crimes openly, laughing as they do it, portrayed as psychopathic to the core. This depiction aligns more with Soviet occupation stories and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.